Today is October 3rd, 2023. We are interviewing Hubert Kuter. My name is Esther Finder. Mr. Kuter is in Oakland, Maine. I am in Henderson, Nevada in the United States, and the language will be English. Thank you for speaking with us today. What is your name, sir?
My name is Hubert Kuter.
And could you please spell it for us?
First name is Hubert. Last name is Kueter.
What was your name at birth?
At birth, Hubert Christian Kuter.
Could you spell that? Same spelling?
Hubert, Christian Christian, and Kuter is Kueter.
Where were you born?
I was born in Breslau, Germany.
When were you born?
December 11, 1930.
And how old are you today?
How old am I today? I have to think. Nancy? Where's Nancy?
That's okay. Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Early 40s.
We'll just keep moving. What was your hometown like in Germany?
My home life? Well,
your hometown.
Oh, Breslau. B-R-E-S.
What was it like in your childhood?
Well, it was city life. We had streetcars running outside our window, up and down the street, connecting us with downtown Breslau. And that's about it. There was a streetcar, and a bridge over the Oder River within walking distance.
Had both sides of your family lived in Germany for many generations?
Yes.
Would you say you had a large or a small family?
I don't. How do you mean? From what point of view? We had aunts and cousins, aunts, uncles, and cousins. I had four cousins, male cousins, and 2 female cousins. I had an uncle, my father's brother, and yes, that's about it, I think, the relatives.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Friedrich Wilhelm Kuter.
And what was his?
Kuter, or Kuter, K-U-T-E-R.
What was his occupation?
He was a musician, playing viola.
And what was his religion?
Protestant.
What was your mother's name?
Katharina Sachs, S-A-C-H-S, last name.
What work did she do?
She was a housewife. She was, well, my father's wife, and became my mother. And then my father died, and then she was alone with me.
What was her religion?
Protestant.
Was she born in that religion?
I'm not sure. She was baptized as an infant and always remained Protestant.
And you said both sides of your family lived in Germany for many generations. Do you know how your parents met?
I'm not sure. My father was a musician and bachelor. He had served in the army during the war. He had been wounded and had to take care of his health, and I think that pretty much sums it up.
Were you an only child?
Yes.
Do you remember your grandparents at all?
Somewhat. My grandmother, my mother's mother, lived in the same house as we did, and she spent a lot of time with me. I was frequently ill, and she would sit with me for hours, I would say, reading to me German children's books.
What do you know about her background?
Her background, she grew up in a large farm. Her husband was educated. He was a chemist and a physicist, and he grew mostly, I think, sugar beets.
What was her religion?
Protestant.
Your mother's mother was Protestant?
Yes.
What early memories, besides the streetcar, do you have of Germany?
Of German? You mean the language?
Of Germany. No, of Germany, of the
Germany.
Country, of your childhood.
Yeah. Well, everyday life, my mother being the housewife, we had a maid, and they would do the household and provide dinners and do the housekeeping work, laundry and cleaning and everything, shopping, and me. I think that sums it up.
Do you have a special memory about a streetcar experience with your mother?
Well, the only one I have, yes, we used the streetcar. We lived a little bit on the outskirts, and whenever my mother wanted to go shopping to big fancy stores, we would take the streetcar into town, and it drove right by our house. The stop was within walking distance, and once approaching, it was, I can't remember the date exactly, but I think it'll become clear. It was the time when, after World War One, Hindenburg was the retired chancellor of Germany, and he was sick at that time, and the passengers in the streetcar talked about that situation, and I picked up a little bit here and there, and as it turned out that Hindenburg had some medical situation which was fairly serious, and I did not, of course, comprehend what was wrong. So I turned to my mother and said in sort of in childish language, haben den auch die Hitlers tot gemacht? Did the Hitler guys kill him too? And so my mother had nothing better to do than get out of the streetcar as fast as she could.
Why did she feel she had to get off the streetcar as fast as she could?
Because the population was pretty much in favor of Hitler and didn't want anything negative known about him among the population of Germany. So just the assumption that possibly Hindenburg might have something to do with Hindenburg's serious health situation was pretty offensive to the German population. So she thought she'd better take me and depart as quickly as she could. So there were no repercussions, and everything ended well.
You mentioned a moment ago that please tell me about what happened to him.
With whom?
Your father. You mentioned your father passed away.
Oh yeah, my father's situation. He had suffered from kidney stones. Repeatedly, he went to health spas for treatment, and it would improve some, and then it would get worse. And he also had been wounded during the fighting. He had as far as I understand it now, he had a fragment of some grenade in his, I think in his lung, which didn't bother him much, but he was advised by his then treating doctor that he should not have an operation ever. It would be injurious to his total health. So that's all I knew. And what I said in the streetcars when I knew that health situation, and when people were talking about Hindenburg being in the hospital, I picked that up and I asked my mother, did the Hitler guys hurt him too? So my mother thought it was time to get out of the streetcar as fast as she could. And that was sort of the political situation in Germany. Hitler was being boosted into a leadership position, and the population was supporting him and probably afraid of saying anything negative about him.
Was your father still alive at the point that you had the streetcar experience?
Yes. He was in a
And
hospital.
you were telling me about your father's, that he died. Do you
Yeah.
remember when he died or how old you were when he died?
Well, I was 4 years old. He died in a hospital, probably following a kidney operation, which was performed in order to remove his cancerous growth. And that's all I knew, really, that suddenly my father was no longer existing.
How did your mother support you and herself after he died?
Well, my mother's background was quite in her favor. Her parents were quite wealthy and owned several large apartment and business houses in downtown Breslau. So, my mother was, I think, well taken care of financially.
Do you remember having any Jewish friends before the war or watching relationships between Jews and Christians before the war in Breslau?
No. That was before the star on outer garments became a law in Germany. So I don't recall any. We had friends who were quite self-conscious about this and always were careful. They carried something so that it concealed the star on their coats. And that's the only contact I had with the political situation at that time.
You were a young child, but do you remember any of the propaganda of the time? Do you remember any of the changes, social changes in the 1930s up until the beginning of the war?
No, I don't think so.
Do you remember starting school?
Yes.
What do you remember about being in school in Germany at that time?
Well, it was a large building not too far from where we lived. You could walk there in probably 10 minutes and through suburban type buildings and streets. And when it was quite a ritual that children who started their school career, usually around Easter time, would be presented with a large Easter bag filled with candy and toys. That's what I remember. And then just walking to school every day. I had a schoolmate living across the street from us, and so the two of us every morning got together and walked to school. And then at the end of the day, which at that age group was around 12 o'clock, we would walk home again.
Were there any Jews in the school with you?
Not that I knew, or I wouldn't even have been aware. I didn't know what that would be. I know we had some friends who were, where the boys were, I guess, half Jewish, and they went to my school too, and we were friends, but it didn't mean much, and it was insignificant as far as our daily routines went in school.
Did you understand what it was to be Jewish, or who a Jew was, or what a Jew was?
No.
What was your level of understanding of all of that?
I would say close to zero. I know I had some children's books which were illustrations of Jewish history, like in Egypt, and then the walk back to Palestine and the birth of Christ. That was about the extent of, and then Christianity becoming the big world religion.
Was anybody in your family Jewish?
Well, you mean Jewish religion?
Yes.
I would say no. No, my mother was not. My grandmother was not.
No Jewish ancestry?
Not that I was aware of at that age.
When you were growing up, did you have to join any Nazi organizations?
Well, yes, it was at that time there was the Hitler Youth all over Germany, which was sort of like a compulsory military training, although the kids were 10 years old, and it was I think a big deal for kids to be in the Hitler Youth and have a uniform, and I was anxious that I would be also given that opportunity and to become a member of the local, what I say, not chapter, but unit, which was sort of divided up among the neighborhood, and they would assign you to a special unit which you were allowed to join or encouraged to join. So my mother felt obligated to give me that opportunity, and went to the sort of the recruitment office of the youth office and enrolled me, and then I found out when and where the meetings were, and my friend from across the street was in that same group, so we went together and became recruits, starting with about 30 other kids, all our age. And we went through the training and learned a number of songs and did physical education, marching and throwing objects, and running and jumping, and all the things that kids that age are encouraged to participate at, my mother had always been very conscientious or anxious to make me physically fit among my equals. So I was in that group, and I would say doing well. We did marching and singing and throwing and javelin and racing. So all the sort of juvenile activities.
Did they also teach you Nazi doctrine and the Nazi philosophy in the Hitler Youth?
I don't recall. I don't think so. I mean, our leaders were just a couple of years older than we were, and not in any way interested in our development.
Did you also study music as a child?
Yes. With my father's occupation as a professional viola player in a major orchestra, they saw to it that I would be given instructions on the violin, and I had a violin teacher from his orchestra who was also Jewish, and I think he and my mother talked politics a lot, and so he stuck to his program, and I think he was concert master in the orchestra, and I think he did a good job with me. But then when the law came out with wearing the they call the Judenstern, the Jewish star emblem, he had to do that, wear it on his outer coat, as did my grandmother. Yeah, she had.
Why did your grandmother have to wear a star?
Well, she was 100% Jew, racially speaking. Although
Which grandmother?
My mother.
Your father's mother?
No,
your mother's mother.
Yeah.
So your grandmother wore a star.
Yes.
We can get back to that in a minute. Let's stay with your music teacher for a moment.
Yes.
So when the laws came out with the star and other laws, were you able to continue with him?
Well, yes. Yes. He would always come, walk. It was maybe a 10-15 minute walk from his house, and he would always carry his violin and some kind of pocket book for his music, and he always carried it to conceal his star. And he was eventually taken to Theresienstadt, one of the major concentration camps for Jewish blood. And he did not come back.
Let's now go back to your grandmother.
Yes.
You said your grandmother had to wear a star because she was Jewish. Was she practicing Judaism?
No.
But she was born Jewish.
She was born Jewish, and she was friends with a Protestant minister who also had married my mother. He was the official, what do they call it, clergy present at their wedding and wed them.
Given that your grandmother was born Jewish, how did that affect your status in Germany after the Nuremberg laws?
I don't think it had any effect on that at all. They just, so what attitude.
So you were considered pure Aryan?
That I would not say. I would think that they made note of the fact that that I was, of Jewish blood. I have 50% Jewish blood.
Was your mother's father also born Jewish?
Yes.
Who knew of your Jewish ancestry?
Pardon me?
Who knew about your Jewish ancestry? Did any of your friends know? Did the school know?
Probably not the school, but all the relatives and many of our friends too.
Was the fact that your maternal grandparents were born Jews have any impact on your mother and father getting married, or were both families okay with the marriage?
Yes, they were okay with it.
During the war, what did you know about how Jews were being treated by the Nazis?
I don't think we knew much at all. I mean, I had my cousins who were my mother's sister's children. There were three boys and one girl, and I know that three of the boys were also drafted. I know they came visiting us. One had a Air Force uniform, and the other one had a regular infantry uniform. And they didn't stay to the end. I don't know if they were just discharged because they were part Jewish or what. I never found out. Anyway, they did not stay in the army very long.
What happened to them after that?
Well, they had jobs. I know one of my cousins was, I don't know in what connection, but he was shipped to Sweden to do some, I don't know what work, but anyway, it was some war-related work, and he stayed there until the end of the war. And my other two cousins were, the youngest one was just started a job somewhere without any military connection. And the oldest one became very ill with some dread disease and died before the end of the war. And the Sophie lived in Berlin. She went to take some university. She was quite artistic, took some courses in wardrobe design, and also took courses in becoming a seamstress. That's an occupation which she carried into the peacetime years afterwards, after the war.
You mentioned earlier that you went to school with some children who were half Jewish.
Yes.
And your mother by birth would be considered Jewish, even though she converted.
Yes.
Were they treated differently by the average German citizens? I'm not talking about the government. I'm talking about the people in the community.
I don't think so, and they did not have to wear any outer symbol of their Jewishness. They didn't have a star like full-fledged Jews had to wear. Like my grandmother had to wear the star. And also my violin teacher, he always carried his notebook in a way that concealed his star.
Was there a term in German to describe people who were of mixed background? Do you remember if there was a term that they used for the mixed, like a mixed breed?
No, I think they just call it Mischehe, a mixed marriage. But they were considered, I think, Jewish. I mean, my mother was not allowed to take seats in a crowded streetcar or go theater tickets or use the railroad. They were, I mean, that was part of their Kennkarte. Are you familiar with that? The ID card that with a huge J printed all over. Yeah, she had that. My mother had that, and my grandmother.
Was your mother anxious about her mother's status or her status under the Nazis as Jews or, descendant of Jews?
For whom?
Was your mother worried about her mother? Was she worried
Yes.
about herself?
Yes.
Was she worried about you because
Yes.
of the Jewish ancestry?
I would say yes every time. She was worried, yeah.
What can you remember about that?
My grandmother always, she had a fox pelt, which she then wore in a way that it would conceal the star. And my mother would try to avoid using the streetcar because there were special seats for not for Jewish passengers. So she was definitely affected.
During the war years, did you as a student in school follow the battles and what was happening in the fighting?
Yes. I think we were, well, in the Hitler Youth too, we were pretty gung-ho, I would say. My equals, contemporaries.
What do you remember about that? For example, do you remember the beginning of the war with Russia? Do you remember any aspect of the war years?
I remember when the Polish campaign was over and Poland had been defeated and the German troops in endless processions would drive through Breslau on their way to their home bases. That's about all I remember. Yeah, pretty much.
Do you remember when America entered the war?
I think I was aware of it. I don't think I quite comprehended what it meant, the significance of this event.
As the war progressed and Germany started to lose, and the Russians started to advance, and the other allies started to advance, what do you remember the situation in Breslau was like? How did things change as the war started to go bad for the Nazis?
I don't think there was any significant treatment of anything under these conditions. Breslau was never bombed during the war, so we didn't have that. And other than that, there was not really any significant involvement in the the Russian campaign. When winter came, there was a big drive with the German population to give warm to the army, gloves and caps and coats and boots. We had to turn in. We were advised to be generous and take it to the collecting places.
Which Allied forces came into Breslau? Who came in?
The Russians.
Which of the Allies?
The Russians.
Can you tell me about what that experience was like?
Yeah, Breslau was declared by the Nazi leaders, the political leaders, to be a fortress. That was a special status which a city could choose to be. That means never surrender. And that was our situation. The Gauleiter, you know Gauleiter, the party head of the SA forces in Breslau, was a staunch defender of the city, and Breslau was officially declared a fortress, which meant that all sides of Breslau were defended, and which excluding all enemy penetration, where there was fighting going on around the perimeter of Breslau all the time. The house where we lived was an old 19th century, some kind of special with turrets and a tower you could climb and look around all 30, around the clock. And at night there were, you could see the signals, the illuminated signals all around the horizon of Breslau. Fires signals going up and then a little bit further down, coming down, and there was all communication of enemy forces fighting around Breslau. Breslau was fought over, I don't know, up to the last day of the war, and the Russians, and I think 3 or 4 commanding officers of Breslau who were willing to surrender were executed by the Nazis. So that never happened. And then I guess they reached some kind of agreement, and one day they were. In coming, marching down the streets in perfect order, Russian regiments singing, and they were pretty good. And then they were quartered with the civilian populations. I mean, we lived in a small apartment which was assigned to us by the Ortsgruppe, by the Nazi government, civilian government, and we were taking in, I don't know, 4 or 5 different Russian soldiers, 1 officer and some men, and but that was pretty mild. There were no incidents, and the Russian soldiers were mostly concerned with finding suitable bedding for their officer, which they then erected in the apartment. And they stayed with us without any, there was no contact, and they were, just people, and no connection. They were decent and clean and concerned with the comfort of their officers. They would sacrifice their own blankets and bedding so they could arrange something suitable for their captain. And I think they somewhat or occasionally shared some of their rations with us. So that was the situation that I remember most, that it was going on until we left Breslau with a bus transport into the Russian zone in larger Germany, in Erfurt, which is a...
Let's not leave Breslau just yet. I have a
Okay.
couple more questions first.
Yeah,
Did you witness any fighting?
no. Well, ran into dead soldiers out on the outskirts in the woods around Breslau. But no fighting.
You said Breslau was not bombed. Could you hear fighting in the distance? Could you hear gunshots or artillery?
Yeah, bombing artillery, and we had that tower on our house, from which the top of which I had a round view of all of Breslau, and there was constant on the horizon. What do they call it? Illuminated messages going up in the sky, and which had some meaning to some Russian units. We encountered that. Other than that, there was very little. And there was bombing every night. Not many, just a couple planes would come and throw bombs near where we lived, often killing people. Yes, it was. That's the way it was up to the last day when the Breslau commanding officer surrendered, which happened, by the way, that Breslau had running commanding officers who were all shot by the Germans because they wanted to surrender, which was no way. So they were, I think, I don't know, I would not be sure, but I would say 3 or 4 generals were executed when they tried to surrender.
Was your grandmother still with you
Oh no,
throughout the whole war?
no, she had, I can't remember which year it was, but she had committed suicide at home. I came home from school. And my mother informed me what had happened. She had taken sleeping pills, which was the standard procedure among Jewish people, that they would carry suicide tablets with them at all times. I think that's how my violin teacher ended his stay in the concentration camp. He committed suicide.
Was there something to make your grandmother commit suicide on that day or at that time? Did something happen to, as a catalyst?
To trigger it? I don't think so. I know that my mother and she had disagreements, and I think my mother indicated that they had quarreled that day. So she felt that she was somewhat to blame.
You may not know the answer to this, but do you know if your grandmother ever got a deportation order? Do you know if she was going to be sent to a concentration camp?
I know what you mean. I think they just, I don't know if she got that, but just a quick note, report Monday morning, 7 o'clock at the bus station, one small suitcase. That was it. I don't know if she had received such notification or not. I don't recall that my mother mentioned it.
Would you say that your mother experienced survivor guilt?
The what?
Would you say that your mother experienced survivor guilt because her mother was committed suicide?
I don't.
Did your mother feel guilty about her mother?
I think a little bit.
Do you know what happened to other Jewish people that your family knew before the war? Did any of them survive?
I don't know. Most of them, I don't know, I think there were quite a few from the Hebrew congregation that had decided to risk staying, to rather face the Russians than go and flee with the German. So that's what I think happened. The German troops surrendered and Russians took over. They were quite clever in establishing a very flourishing black market in the airfield, which they had created into a nice level area where they could display their merchandise and yes. And
who did that? Who did that? Who displayed their merchandise, their black market merchandise?
The Russian soldiers.
Russians. Before we have you leave Breslau, I want you to make sure that we cover everything. Do you have any other memories of your years in Breslau? Do you remember, for example, Kristallnacht or any other event in Breslau?
Yeah. I remember Kristallnacht, or the day after, when all our favorite little ice cream places and bakeries were just demolished, the windows broken, everything ruined. That I remember. Other than that, I don't. It was sort of almost comical because the Russian soldiers were after booty, just like the German population, and in an area that was sort of a villa congregation of houses near the Oder River, and it was really outstanding living in beautiful houses big yards, and in the background the river, the Oder, and the Russians just, I mean, devastated these houses. There were no sanitary facilities available, and they just went to do their thing just anywhere in the house, on the carpets, and they kept their supply. They had a big herd of sheep grazing in the Oder meadows, guarded by just one Russian soldier. And I was pretty upset by that, because we had virtually nothing much to eat anymore. And I thought, a little sheep wouldn't be bad, and I was able to separate a family of sheep, the mother and its, what do they call them, a baby sheep, not a calf.
A lamb?
A lamb. Very good. Lamb, yes. I somehow was able to separate the lamb from its mother, and got an old bag and wrapped it around the baby sheep and took it home. We had a very experienced cook who was anxious for me to get out of there and leave the sheep. And so we had a couple good meals of lamb these days. But other than that, the Russians established stores where Germans could, on their own German ration cards, could purchase certain necessary food items. There was some butter and eggs, sugar, salt, toilet paper, and that was run by Russian, I don't know if there was a special unit who thought about that, but anyway, that they kept the population supplied with certain necessities. In addition to, they ran the black market in town, where they would empty apartments, take the good stuff to the black market, and receive some Russian rubles for it, and then the Germans could use that money and buy certain basic ingredients, sugar and salt and some fat, oil. So they in a way, and they kept supplying different items to the black market. They kept the black market going. in order to deplete the German population of anything. Because the Germans would then take their, valuables, jewelry and watches to the black market and trade it for certain necessary ingredients for surviving, some oil and butter and eggs. Yeah, that was the situation at the time, about when we had enough, and my mother, that we had been offered to ride on a bus operated by the Russians to Erfurt, a large city in central Germany, which we did. That was sort of the coldest time of the year, and there was no heat in the buildings, nothing. There was no food in the stores. There were no ration cards, and nothing to keep you warm. But I don't know, we somehow managed, and then we got into a train that was going to Hanover, which was in the British occupied part of Germany, and their conditions were quite different. There was much more organization. There were places where the population could be advised to find certain apartments and firewood or something like that. And that's where we stayed, and my mother had connections made with the Jewish congregation. Yes.
Please continue what you're saying. Your mother made connections with the Jewish congregation.
Yeah, and I think they helped us a large deal and kept us somewhat fed and warm until we had established a connection to our relatives in the British, in Hanover and along the Baltic Sea coast. And so we managed to get on a train in that direction. Yes.
I do have a couple of questions for you, sir.
Yes.
When you went from the Russian zone to the British zone, were there any issues with you going from one area to the other?
No. And we were puzzled by that. We had some signals, some objects which I think meant something to the Russians, but not to us, and we carried that, and then the Russians would let us cross the border. Yes. Yeah.
And your mother reached out to the Jewish community after the war for help?
Did she do what?
Was she reached out to the Jewish community
Yes.
after the war for help?
Yes. We stayed in touch with them in Kempten. There was a very active Jewish congregation.
And this is still in Germany?
That is still in Germany, in Hanover.
And what other steps did your mother take? What other steps did your mother take to rebuild life after the war was over? Where did she want to go?
Well, I don't know. I think she wanted to ensure my getting a continued education, and I attended the secondary schools in, well, from Hanover we went to the British sector where my father's sister was living, and from there into, I can't remember the name of the town, a larger town between the coast and Hanover, which had schools and churches and a unit of British military. My mother got a job there in the kitchen, which enabled her to channel something in my direction. And then, from there we took up contact with our relatives in the States, and they managed to send us some packages with hard to get items like coffee and some chocolate and luxury items like that. I could always tell coming home from school that the house smelled of coffee, freshly brewed coffee. And she would say, yes, so we had a package from Aunt so-and-so, and there's some coffee, and here's sausage and butter. So that was always a big deal.
How long did you stay in Germany?
I know we spent a Christmas there. That's a good question. I never tried to pinpoint it down. Anyways, the connections were made with our relatives in the States. They were all doing quite well. A couple of my cousins were professors at universities. And well, I think that sort of brings me to the end of our experiences with.
Let's take a break, because you've been speaking now for almost an hour and a half.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and I'll ask you about leaving Germany and coming to the United States.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll take a few minute break.
All right, fine, thank you.
Okay, we're back. And you told me some stories that I'd like you to please repeat so we can include it in your testimony.
Yeah.
And then we'll get back to your last days in Germany and coming to the United States. But
Yeah.
let's go back. You said something about a mortar shell
A what?
and a piano. Can you tell me
Oh.
the story of the mortar shell?
The water shock.
The mortar
Oh, the
shell.
mortar shell. Yeah, right. Well, that was just, we were sitting in the, like I said, the walls were like that, concrete and brick. And I was sitting there with two German soldiers who knew they had found a good, safe haven in our house. And then suddenly, through the outer wall, came crashing a mortar shell, which was about that long and that big around, and was filled with some yellow powdery stuff. And the German soldiers said, "Oh yeah, that's one of the grenades that didn't go off." So that was the end of it. So it would have blown us all to bits if it had exploded, but it didn't explode. So, and that house, I wish I had a picture of that house. It was unique, built around 1900, and it was red brick and concrete, and with a tower, and with around, you could get a view, around view, all around. You could, and we could before we became a fortress, Breslau was sort of a safe haven for the German army, because once they were in Breslau, they virtually would not be molested by enemy fire. So they felt kind of safe. So that's why those two soldiers were sitting with me in the hallway of the Hopfhaus. And they looked at it and said, "Yeah, boy, if that had gone off, we would all been blown to bits." There was some high power explosive in those grenades. Yeah.
Also mentioned a moment ago something about moving children out of harm's way, but you were not allowed to go.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand the story. Could you please explain it to me?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what happened. I don't know if the Germans ran children's transports out of Breslau, because the Russian planes would come every night and bomb where the civilians had found housing, us among them, and during the day too sometimes. So those houses were they were death traps, nothing else. And we tried not to be caught in them, because they were death traps. And then
you had mentioned that you were not allowed to go with the other children because you were considered Michelin.
Yeah.
So I was confused by what you told me. I was hoping you could clarify.
I don't know what. Oh, with the other children, with the German children, yeah. Well, I was a unclean luggage for them. I was not worth saving to the German mind, or to the Nazi mind. so I could not go along on those children transport to some safe haven outside the city.
Is there anything else that you've remembered that you want to share about your time in Breslau?
I can't think. The soldiers, I always thought the Russian soldiers would not get along with the Polish, because the Polish had a military presence in Breslau now, after Germany had quasi-surrendered, but they didn't. They were there, and so they were Polish soldiers fighting against the Germans, and they bombed. They came bombing Breslau at night too. We had buried my mother had buried her jewelry in a I don't know, some kind of vase or flask or something under a certain tree, and I was worried, or we were worried that they would somehow be discovered. So I went over there where I had buried them, and I found the place, and I dug down, and there was the container that contained my mother's jewelry. So that worked out in our favor.
Okay.
And my mother tried to safeguard some of her cash. We had taken quite a bit of money out of the bank, out of our bank account, and my mother was not sure how to keep it safe, so she put it into her shoe. Unfortunately, it was a rainy day, so you can imagine what happened to the paper money. It was it's mostly just shredded to mush. Yeah. Well, you couldn't buy anything with it anyway. The black market was flourishing, and there were official Russian units that were going through the neighborhoods in that area, which was probably occupied by well-to-do German industrialists and professors and all kinds of wealthy people, I had a friend who had been apprenticed to what they call it, a locksmith, and with his help we could virtually get into any house or any apartment, so that we made use of that. But other than that, there was across the Oder River, there was an area of lakes which were used by the German water company. They would purify the water and use it to for the city, for the water system. And well, I try. Yeah, they were eager. I would. What was it? Let's see. I'd love to fish, and those lakes were all stocked with eating fish. And I put out night lines that would attract fish and catch them. And then the next day I would come in the morning and I would check all my traps, and it was on the other side of the Oder River. Are you familiar with the Oder? It's a large, major river in Germany, from Poland into the Baltic Sea, used for shipping purposes. And so I was dealing with a large amount of rather valuable coal from the Upper Silesian coal mining country, which was very much in demand. It was being mined all the time and used by the population and industry. I don't know what else could I bring.
Can I ask you about your departure from, you had mentioned you had family in the United States.
Yes.
Was that on your mother's side or on your father's side of your family?
On my mother's side. They were all, on my mother's
both
side,
sides?
they were all Jewish related. So they were professors at German universities, and when Hitler came, they sought to disappear as fast as they could, which they had very successful careers at major American universities. They still do. They still.
Do you know when you came to the United States? How old you were?
Yeah, let's see, how old was I? I was certainly too old or not to be drafted into any army, into German army, and yeah, I was lucky I did not get drafted, because they did take in they call it Kampfgruppe Hitlerjugend, armed regiment of the Hitler Youth, which was just that. They were of age, they were 14 to 16 probably, and they were quickly given some military training, how to shoot a rifle and throw a hand grenade, and then they were off to some regiment, and that they called Kannonfodder, because they would be picked off instantly. So we dealt with that group.
Okay, do you remember if you had any expectations of America? What did you think America was going to be like?
Like, you know the story of Schlaraffenland? The land of, well, milk and honey, where everything grows on trees and runs in rivers, and that's what I thought we would encounter in America, and well, it wasn't quite like that. I mean, they fed us adequately, by HIAS was quite active. Are you familiar with HIAS? HIAS, the Hebrew.
Highest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
HIAS, yeah. They financed large Jewish immigration operations. Yeah. So they.
Do you know what highest stands for? Do you remember what it
Hebrew
means?
Immigration, I don't know, something.
Okay.
Agent.
That's okay. You told me about your expectations. What were your first impressions when you got here?
A land of milk and honey.
Those were your expectations.
Yeah.
When you got here, how were you treated?
I would say, well, we had relatives in the medical field, and the doctor in New Paltz, New York, took us in. And that was sort of, I mean, they did, he was the son of the doctor who had given birth to me in Breslau Hospital. So we stayed with them for a bit, and his sister was also a research medical scientist in Albany at the university, and they sort of fostered us along the way. Found a place where my mother could function as a cook and domestic, which was fine with her. You can ask her. She probably be glad to talk about it.
When you came here, did people ask you about what your life was like during the war in Europe? And if so, what did you tell them?
Yeah, they did ask me, and some were I went to school then in an American high school where some of the boys had brothers in the American I think some of them had been killed. But it was a good experience.
What was a good experience?
Being in an American high school.
Did you get involved with sports or music in school?
With foreign students?
No, did you get involved with sports or music?
Oh, yeah, sports, yeah. Somewhat. They had a group going to a snack bar during lunch hour. So they continued that, and it always ended up as a race from the high school to the little diner. And I can say that I was a better runner than most of them. They said, "Oh, looking forward to track season when you will be running for us." Well, it never turned. I didn't stay at that high school, at the Chatham High School. I had a hard time fitting into an American high school because they did not really try to make me understand and feel at home and teach me. But I didn't stay there very long. We always had a race from the school building to the diner. And as it turned out, I was a faster runner than any of them, and they were looking forward to track season when I would run for their team. But it didn't come. We then went, I don't know, I had a hard time fitting in, and a Lutheran clergyman got a hold of me and suggested to us and to my mother and me that I should go to that boarding school which was run by the Lutheran school, Lutheran congregation, or Concordia. I don't know if you're familiar with the Concordia schools. They have a seminary, and a undergraduate school and a graduate school too. And the undergraduate school was glad to accept me as a student, which was dormitory style. We had rooms with 3 or 4 occupants and had all our meals there and sports, and I very much enjoyed it.
Were you able to get a college education in the United States?
Yes. Again, I became a member of the Lutheran Church, and there's a Lutheran seminary in Bronxville, New York. Are you familiar with it? Bronxville, which was a high school and a junior college all together, and then the graduates from that would go to the seminary school for future ministers. So I was not really into that. So I did the high school education, which then enabled me to become a student at Concordia, where I entered as a sophomore, I think, and went through the whole system and graduated, and then became a student at Valparaiso University. I don't know if you, yeah. So I graduated. I went to Concordia College in St. Louis or wherever it was, and I graduated, and then I went to Bronxville, and from there to Valparaiso University, where I enrolled as a freshman and graduated. I went through the whole 4 years, more or less successfully, and then graduated, and that was about the time when military, the draft was waiting for me, and that's what happened to me. I graduated from Concordia and I got a summer job working construction until I got the notification from the Army to report for my career in the U.S. Army, which I was doing, and I was very successful. I was very, very fit and athletic, and upon graduation, the commanding general said, "You sure you don't want to become an officer?" He wanted me to stay and take the course for becoming an infantry officer, but all my mother and my relatives were very much against that possibility. So I went the 4 years at Concordia, which 2 years, and which brought me to Germany a couple of times as a U.S. soldier, which was a good time. It was a good deal to become a U.S. soldier in Germany at that time. We had all the privileges and it was good. It was a good time.
Did you go back to Breslau?
No, it was Polish. No, Iron Curtain country. So I did not.
What branch of the military did you serve in?
Infantry. Fort Dix was infantry.
And your final rank?
PFC.
Are you an American citizen?
Yes.
When did you become a U.S. citizen?
I think one of the summers which I spent in Valparaiso working construction, I received the invitation to become a U.S. citizen, which I lived up to. I studied up on it a little bit and took the test, and that was it.
What did you do after you were discharged from the service?
I have to say that in the service, I was a linguist because I was fluent in German. So I became a interrogator in military intelligence in the army, which is, well, I guess it's a little bit better than some. So upon yeah, I was very fit physically, and when we had our fitness sort of graduation exercises, I was top scorer, and the commanding officer of Fort Dix said, "Are you sure you don't want to become an officer?" I said, "No, thanks. My mother would have killed me." Anyway, that was, I had what, 2 years or a year and a half, good year and a half as a linguist, as in the intelligence outfit.
So after you were discharged from the service, did you start working? Did you go back to school? What did you do?
I went back to school.
What did you study?
Well, I took German, old High German, which is like Old English, sort of an archaic form of the language, which nobody can speak or understand. And I learned it. I studied it as a foreign language. I never used it in any way, but that was my training as in the military intelligence. Didn't add up to anything.
Can you tell me about your professional career? What did you do for a living?
Well, I went to grad school. I was into German literature and old Germanic languages, so I studied those, including things like Gothic, which is nothing resembling any modern German language, and then I started teaching college courses.
When you were teaching, did you tell your students about your childhood and your wartime experiences?
Some of it, yeah. I did not talk about concentration camps and anti-Semitism. But I think there were several of us who had experienced anti-Semitism among the German, in the German training.
You speak publicly. Have you ever spoken publicly about your experiences?
No.
Have you experienced anti-Semitism in the United States? Or have you witnessed it?
Witnessed it? I don't know. I think I have experienced it. Not personally, but among friends who had Jewish relatives. But I don't think I was ever really treated with hostility. Maybe making fun or making fun of my circumcision or something. Whatever they found different and strange and amusing.
You were young during the war. When did you fully realize the extent of the genocide of the Jewish people? When did you finally understand what had happened?
Well, when friends and some relatives and friends started wearing the star, including my grandmother. I think that was a real shock. That my grandmother would be subjected to something that
Have you ever written your memoir?
Well, I have published a book, which is somewhere in that pile over there. Titled,
we'll take a look at it in a minute.
Okay. My Tainted Blood is the title. So that sort of says it all.
Has your view of religion changed or been impacted by your experiences during the war?
Did I feel religion changed?
Has your personal view of religion
my personal
changed?
view of religion changed.
As a result of the war?
As a result of the war. I don't think so.
Okay.
It's a hard one to answer.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share before I ask you my last question?
Good. Nothing that comes to mind. There must be, but I can't articulate anything.
Okay, now let me ask you then my last question.
Okay.
What message do you have for people in the future who will watch this testimony? What should people learn from your experience? What message do you have? you have any advice for the future viewers?
I would say join a Jewish congregation and experience the teachings and the meaning of the holidays and, well, the more or less acquaint yourself with the entirety of that particular teaching.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for enduring it, listening. I'm trying to think. Yes. Okay.
You can cut.
Oh, sorry.
Sir, who is this lady? Would you please introduce her?
Yes, that's the first time I formally introduce her. This is Nancy, my wife. We've been married
a long time.
a long time.
Yes. Anyway, I'm delighted for Hubertus to have this opportunity to talk to you. It was initiated by a cousin of a cousin in Redondo Beach, and we did not know about your organization until now, wishing we had known about it sooner. And but I'm delighted that many bits of information came out I didn't know as much as he's told me. He's been forthcoming about everything in his life, always, but there were things that isolated incidents I was unaware of. So, very nice. You're a wonderful interviewer. I think this was a good idea, after all. Thank you.
I thank you both. And we're going to move on to the photos.
Oh, okay.
What are we looking at here, sir?
Your former students.
Oh, I don't have my glasses.
He doesn't have his glasses on, but they don't do any good anyway.
Who has my glasses?
Hmm?
Where are they? My glasses.
I haven't any idea because they don't.
Okay, let's stop.
Yeah.
Okay, Nancy, I understand you're going to help us because Hubert has some limited visibility on some of these things. Can you please tell us what we're looking at here?
Yes, this was a group of now graduated Colby students. They were his students, his language students, and we merely got together in our home and had dinner. That's it.
When was it taken?
Oh, quite a while ago. All these students are middle-aged by now, so it was taken quite a while ago.
And where is the star of our show?
The star of our show is right in the center, looking at the camera.
And his name, please?
Hubert Cuter, professor, doctor.
And it was taken in your home? And
yes, right in this
room.
room. Right in this room.
No, what city?
Oakland, Maine.
Thank you. And who is this, please?
This is Hubert's father, Fritz
His name?
Kuter, Frederick Wilhelm Kuter, and it was taken, obviously, he died a young man when he was only 34, and that is a picture of him at work. That's what he did. He played the viola in the symphony. It might have been taken at the occasion when he substituted for the viola from the Hungarian String Quartet. He was the violist that on that particular occasion. This might have been it.
Can you give me an approximate time frame? Are we talking the 1930s, the 1920s? What are we looking at?
Oh, let me see. Oh, it would have been before 1936. You were born in 1930. You were under 4 when he died. He was born in 1898. So I was wrong about his being 34. He was 36 when he died. So approximately age of 36 in this picture.
Okay, and where was it taken? At least what country?
Breslau, Germany.
Thank you. And who is this?
This is Hubert in his earlier years, and obviously it sort of indicates a lifestyle at the time for him. The little Lord
Can you give me his full name, please?
Hubertus Christian Kuter.
And do you know approximately when and where this was taken?
It was taken in Breslau, Germany, and I can only guess at the age. There's nothing on it that indicates, but he certainly appears to be under 4.
So that would be approximately
1934.
1933 or 1934.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please tell us, what is this?
All right. This is his autobiography. He wrote it after his mother died. His mother would have been uncomfortable because she didn't ever want him to go public with his heritage, really. So she was afraid. She was afraid for him, his safety. It was always safety. So anyway, he wrote the book, and that's
When?
about 10 years ago.
So an approximate date?
I have to look at the front of the book.
Oh, no. No, don't pull it out.
Okay,
So
okay.
this is 2023 and it was about 10 years ago?
Yes.
Okay, and can you please give us his full name?
Hubertus Christian Kuter.
Okay, several times you've called him Hubertus. Can you please clarify? Because he introduced himself as Hubert.
I noticed his birth name was Hubertus, and he said that his friends in Germany called him Hubertus as a youngster.
Okay. And the book was published in the United States?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. And what is this?
This is the certification of being a ski instructor in this country. He acquired it in Arapahoe, Colorado. And tell me if I'm right, Hubert. I fell asleep. And the pen that goes with it. But at least you could see his picture, how he looked without a beard. And this was approximately 1963, 64.
Okay, and his full name, please?
Hubertus Christian Kuter.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And this now concludes the interview. Thank you for your help, Nancy, with the photos.
Oh, you're welcome.